You are welcome to my channel, The Indian Valor, and this is your host Himanshu Nirban. And today we are joined by one of our special guests, who has been a Deputy General of Indian Army's Mechanized Division. He is Lieutenant General Ashok Bhim Shivane, retired. Sir had been awarded the Param Visist Seva Medal, Ati Visist Seva Medal, and Visist Seva Medal for his honorary and courageous service in the Indian Army by the President of India. Sir is the second generation Indian Army officer from his family. Sir belongs from a very diversified military background, and Sir had started his military career in 1978, and where he served at different positions and different places among with the army in India, and he superannuated from his post as a lieutenant general in the year December 2017. I beg your pardon. And after in between this excellence years, Sir had served at various places in India, and he was posted also in the United Nations peacekeeping mission in Guatemala. And Sir also commanded the army in the anti-insurgency operations in Jammu and Kashmir from 1997 to 1999. After that, Sir has also served in various positions in Indian Army in ADG and PP and perspective planning and future restructuring of Indian Army. And other than this, Sir had an outstanding career of Indian Army where he studied MSc and double MPhil and PGDM with first class distinction. Sir had also been awarded the Chief of Army Commendation Card and citation from different army commanders during his services. Sir had also been the chairman of Indo-Russian Land System Conference in 2017, and he is an acclaimed defense analyst with over 80 publications in his credit, including a book. And after retiring from the Indian Army, Sir had been serving with as a general officer who is presently a senior defense advisor and member of the board of governors, where he is advising several think tanks and he is writing articles for different defense magazines besides Global Legal Innovation Advisory, Drive Safe India, Environmental, and he was an environmental NGO and has a very good knowledge of hospitality industry. Sir had been a consultant to the Ministry of Defense that is coming under the Defense Factory Board from 2018 to 2020. So you are welcome to our show, sir.
Thank you.
And so, sir, this our show will be based on the Chinese disengagement process that has happened right now in the recent days, and like after having a 10 months period of engagement between the Indian Army and Chinese Army on the Ladakh frontier, the Chinese troops are disengaging from their positions of Pangong So right now. So, sir, I have a few questions for you, and my viewers would like to know about this kind of what kind of disengagement process is this, and is there any kind of possibility that Chinese will come again on the position of the Pangong So? So, sir, my first question to you is, how do you see China has not settled on LAC dispute with India, and it used it as a strategic leverage. What are the reasons for Chinese periodic aggressive revisionist behavior against India, sir?
Uh, Firstly, thank you, Himanshu, for the kind invite. I'm sure this your channel, The Indian Valor, will do tremendous good for all its viewers. And I wish the channel the very best. Now, today we discuss a very important and a critical issue that the nation faces as regards the Chinese belligerence and its aftermath and what the future holds for us.
Yes, sir.
Your first question is a very important question because it's a foundational question as to why Chinese did what they did and why they keep doing it periodically.
Yes, sir.
Because unless we understand the roots of this question, I'm afraid the solutions that we evolve would not be holistic and would not have a long-lasting impact and long-lasting solution as such. So we need to understand the problem. Now, the problem is Chinese military aggression needs to be seen from the prism of this overall strategic ambition. Thus, we need to look beyond the military dimension of just Ladakh and LAC, which are only one of the means to its ends. We must understand that the Chinese strategic focus are a derivation of its middle kingdom mentality or dream. And therefore, it results in its culture of revisionism and expansionism. And it's also another factor that is deeply embedded in the Chinese side is the century of humiliation that it has faced. So therefore, it draws its sentinel goals or its future ambitions to be in two phases. First,
Yes, sir.
to be the sole hegemonic power in a unipolar Asian region. That is the first part that it wants to achieve. And this, thereafter, it wants, or simultaneously, it wants to be a global superpower in a bipolar world. In what time frames it will manifest? Sometimes it says 2022, 2030, and later one at 2049, 2050. But timings are not important. What we need to understand is the psyche and the focus of the Chinese. And because of this, it has manifested into economic coercion, political coercive diplomacy, debt diplomacy, creating dependencies, political arrogance, assertiveness, and military aggressiveness, not only in the Himalayas, but you see in the South China Sea, you see it in the internal dimension, you see it in Taiwan. These are all manifestation of its culture and its strategic focus. Now,
Yes,
coming down to India, how and why is its behavior with India what it is? Now, India's regional and global ascent is a challenge to China. It's a thorn in its first stride of its ambition, that is to be a regional hegemon in a unipolar Asian region. And therefore, it wants to stymie this Indian ascent or India's deny India the space. And thus it creates military and economic leverage, sometimes political also, to periodically attempt to stymie India's future course. Now you see this happening periodically. In the military domain, 2013, Depsang took place, 2014, Shumar took place,
yes,
2015, again Depsang, 2017, it was Doklam and North Penang, so clashes again took place in 2017. And in 2020, there's a massive intrusion in the Ladakh sector.
yes, sir.
Similarly, economically, it has created a dependency. You see, today, China is the largest trading partner of India, in spite of, in 2020, in spite of what it has done. That is the sort of dependency it has created. I'm told it is somewhere close to $77.7 billion, which is more than what the second and third position of US and UAE is. And
Hmm.
not only that, what is concerning is the balance of trade between the India and China is so favorable to China that it gives it another leverage. So Chinese strategy towards India for furtherance of core interest must be clearly understood to address the roots of the problem. And therefore, it brings me to the aspect of end, ways, and means when China looks at India. The ends are twofold when China looks at India. One, stymie and retard. India's rise as a regional competitor by denying it the strategic space as such. Two, prevent India US bonhomie as a counterbalance to its global predominance or aspirations, particularly as it is manifesting in the Indo-Pacific, the Quad, and the Indian Ocean region. So, if that is the ends, the ways that it involves or it does is by strategic coercion, military and non-military domain both create economic dependencies. It it aims to isolate, at least dilute India's standing in its immediate neighborhood and prevent its prominent role in the global arena and global forums like the United Nations Security Council. And therefore, it uses this means of military coercion on the LSE, adverse economic balance, fuels Pakistan as an active adversary to keep our Western Front busy, weans away the immediate neighborhood by the string of pearls and by creating turbulence and anti India sentiments, and it continues to maintain a favorable balance of power and technology edge as compared to India. So, to cut it short, as a nation, we need to focus on the strategic and geopolitical plane of understanding China and deriving solutions which address the roots of the problem, not the leaves of the problem.
Yes. So my next question to you is that you have just told me about the details of the Chinese involvement in the Indian inclusion in the Ladakh and from Ladakh to Arunachal Pradesh at different time at different places. So my next question to you is how Indian-China disengagement process has begun after a 10th month long hiatus, and why this time the Chinese and what was the reason exactly that China had to accept this disengagement plan?
Okay. Uh, there are many reasons why both China and India have accepted and moved forward towards this disengagement plan. Uh, Finally, it takes two to tango, and
Yes, sir.
therefore, the start of military disengagement and the easing of the uh, military tensions is a welcome step. That is the start point, and it needs to be seen holistically because, like I mentioned earlier, the military is just one dimension of India-China dynamics. So I would say whatever has been out in the open, it needs to be seen with cautious optimism, even though it is potentially significant for the future. Now, very frankly, I think there was a realization by both nations that in a COVID impacted era and the evolving global geopolitical dynamics that have taken place during this period and are still evolving, the ability to achieve strategic outcomes by either side has diminished. So, war was not an option, though the sparks were there, and continued standoff was not only hurting both sides economically, militarily, but adversely impacting the global image of both. Thus, what led to the disengagement needs to be seen from the military, political, and psychological factors. When you look at the military dimension
Yes,
of
sir.
this disengagement as such, well, uh, both sides were well entrenched and forces had built up, and it was a status quo. Gaining further military advantage was very limited because it would have resulted in a war, which I said was not an option, not something that either side wanted at this particular time when COVID and economy were impacted. The action by India on the night of 29th, 30th August of occupying the dominating heights of Kailash Ranges south of Penangsol Lake was a military turning point, which put tremendous pressure on the Chinese side, as also tarnished the image as such. Therefore, this resoluteness and resolve of the response of Indian defense forces and the growing leverage of India in the Indo-Pacific was not in the favor of the Chinese, and that it was hurting their image as not being able to achieve what they actually came in for. Now, China also had multiple front dilemmas,
Yes, sir.
be it in the Asia Pacific, be it in the Taiwan thing, be it in the internal security dimension, or be it in Himalayas. So there were too many things militarily it had to handle. And on top of that was the COVID era where it was looked at globally as as a villain. So therefore, I think the time and space was not favorable, and disengagement was looked upon favorably by China. Even in the political and the economic domain, you know, large forces by China on the high altitude was hurting them. The Indian army uh, is very well trained in high altitude warfare, possibly the best in the world. We have been to Siachen, which is much more difficult, and therefore our acclimatization, our morale, our training, our ability to fight in high altitude was much superior at the soldier level, may not be at the technological level and infrastructure level, but certainly at the soldier level, it was much superior. And the Chinese got a taste of that at Galwan when the Indian response was very intense and aggressive. Uh, Second thing is, even economically, both sides needed to rebuild, and there was a focus for that. Politically, I think China came under global pressure also,
Yes, sir.
and its image was retarding, it was receding, and taking a beating both internally, externally. Internally, also, the domestic press and media were talking of occupation of Kailash Range, which surprised the Chinese, and not being able to do anything further. So I think both sides realize that the world will not support escalation any further, nor will they be able to achieve any further outcomes. And therefore, India and China realize that it needs time. Particularly, I think India realized that it needs time, it needs resources, and it needs to focus to bridge the relative balance of power between China and India. So there was this situation where honorable exit for both was the solution. Even psychologically, if you talk of a face-saving exit option, that was the need of the hour for both. It could be perceived as a win-win situation by either side because these are winning or losing is a matter of perception, or it could be no win, no loss situation for both. But both sides are now claiming it as a victory for its domestic audience. But if you look at the timing of release of the video, the Chinese of those we assessed as close to 40 soldiers, but they have disclosed 4 to 5 casualties which are killed at Galwan by our brave soldiers. It was why was it released at this time? It was aimed to stir national euphoria against India as an aggressor and tell them that look, We lost 40, but we killed 20. So build up an image of a win-win situation. Yet, like in all modern crisis and conflict situation, the notion of victory continues to be in the gray zone. So I would end my answer to this question to by saying that it is a welcome step, but too premature to come to big conclusions. Given the growing mistrust and Chinese intentions, which can never be trusted, we need to tread this path step by step, very, very cautiously. It's now up to the Chinese to show their intentions with sincerity, because beyond doubt, to the world, they have been proved as the aggressor in the Ladakh region.
Yes, sir. Sir, my next question to you is correlated with the disengagement scene only. Like, sir, how do you see that India has given up its advantageous position on Kailash range? And how do you see that this disengagement from the perspective of India and China, as both sides claim it as a victory from their perspective?
Yeah, I did mention that the occupation of Kailash Range on 29th, 30th August last year was a turning point which put the pressure on the Chinese. No doubt upon that, because we were looking upon their Moldo garrison, and we had a major uh, operational and tactical advantage should the escalation manifest itself. So that was a very, very uh, good advantage we got, achieving total surprise and perfectly executed and thought of. But like I said, it may be premature to draw big conclusions, as presently it is just a tactical phased temporary withdrawal. You know, when you withdraw and create buffer zones or disengagement zone, you are putting the problem temporarily into the cold fridge or the cold storage as such. It's not yet resolved as such, but your aim is to disengage so that you can de-escalate the situation, which is correct, which is the first aspect of dealing with it. But the issue is much more complex, and the roots of the face off continue to remain. Therefore, it needs to be seen holistically, this withdrawal, and strategically analyzed. Coming to the tactical aspects of the withdrawal. Well, what was the ground situation before commencement of withdrawal?
Yes, sir.
The Chinese in April, May had intruded. It was not transgression. It was intrusion in large strength in the area of the Galwan, Hot Spring, Gogra, Panangso North, and earlier there were already friction points in terms of stopping patrolling and face-offs in the Damchok and the Dapsang areas. So this disengagement process, which has started, and the first stage of which is completed, so I believe, and for the next stage, discussions are on. But there were five key points for this first stage. One, not it was Penangso-centric. Now, first, both sides will disengage in north of Penangso. India, the area between finger 4 and finger 8 is the disputed area. India will go towards finger 3, where it's got its camp, and China will go the other side of finger 8, where it has got its permanent establishment. China had come up near to finger 4 and 5. It had made certain military infrastructure and bunkers and military, emplacements in this area. So it had intruded inside what was perceived by India as its area. That is, India considered the area up to figure 8 as its boundary, whereas China considered up to 4. So first was disengage. That was the first point. Second point was this area to be put as a demilitarized zone, no patrolling, no military activity. Third was that the whatever construction was done, military construction, the ground had to be leveled. The fourth was that relating to this, that India's occupation of the Kailash range in south of Penang had to withdraw. And the last point was that 48 hours after this is completed, the discussion for the next stage would commence. Now, these were essentially a 5 point. Now, what are the analysis? That is more important,
Yes, sir.
really. The first aspect is in the North Bank, to my thinking, it has created an equal leverage. Equal leverage because if you see from the Chinese perception, they perceive the LSE at finger 4, and they've gone back to finger 8. So they have withdrawn in their perception from their area. And they were the aggressor because they came in and established militarily up to finger 5 and near finger 4. In the Indian perception that the LSE was up to finger 8 and we have pulled back this side of finger 3. So both sides you can look at it as both sides has withdrawn from their territory or the other one has withdrawn from this territory to the other. But the point is both sides have pulled back from what their perception lines were as such. But what is proven is that China was the aggressor and forced to move back from where it has occupied the Indian perception of the territory. And there would be both sides, there would be no right to patrolling or military activity in it. So you have created a buffer zone or a demilitarized zone as such, which has its own dynamics because it's a temporarily postponing the problem or, like I said, putting it in a cold storage as such. Now, south of Penang, so in the South Bank, is the strategically and the operationally important, military operationally important Kailash range, which on our side, and we occupied this on 29th, 30th, giving us a vantage and an operational advantage to look over the Moldo garrison and the activities therein, and if required, if the situation escalated, we could have dominated the area across. But yet, let me tell you, from what is in the open domain and what has been stated, we did not cross the LAC in this area, or there was no perception of LAC in this area. We just occupied the heights on our own area as such. In the official release of South Bank and Kailash range, the details are sketchy. But if we have pulled back, what is important to understand, we have moved back from our own side, which had a major strategic advantage. The balance area, Hot Spring and Gogra, which are under discussion on the 10th round of the military meeting, are they easier to resolve? But the key issue remains Demchok and more importantly, the Depsang Plains, which is historically, even before the April standoff, an important strategic area which the Chinese are blocking our patrols from going at a choke point or a wide junction. Why it is important is because it leads to the DBO airfield and it leads to the Karakoram range. So if they come in, it will have impact on our build-up towards the Siachen as also cut off. Their sensitivity is there, the Karakoram highway is passing close by, and our infrastructure coming up has been a concern for them. Therefore, the key issue to me understanding is that while we had an advantage south of Depsang by occupying heights, dominating height in our own area, pulling back in our own area should have been related to the resolution of the more complex issue at Dapsang Plains as such. So, sum it up, I would say no big conclusions yet. Maybe things will work out as favorably as we want it. The withdrawal is a tactical aspect of putting off the spark temporarily, and we need to maintain vigilance and alertness and surveillance, and not only that, be ready for any adversity should it manifest as such. Because the Chinese have been, in some media, have been saying the fast pace at which they have withdrawn can also be the pace at which they can get back. So you can't trust the Chinese. Depsang plain concern remains primary and needs to be resolved. And lastly, we need to see the roots of the Chinese problem, not just the leaf, and need to address it beyond not just the military dimension, which may be the first step, but much more beyond it with a long term perspective. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Yeah. So my next and last question to you is about the strategic relationship between India and China. So how do you see the future strategic relationship of India and China context? Like if India's China policy with the geopolitical dynamics post disengagement, will it change or not?
Okay, I think that is the key question if we understand the problem, because we need to do some crystal gazing at the strategic plane level. Uh,
Yes.
the rise of a belligerent China, the rise of a belligerent China has been the paramount challenge post World War II to global peace, stability, and shared prosperity. There's no doubt upon that. Not only to India, but worldwide, sorry, pardon me, the turbulence that it has been creating is indeed a matter of global concern. As far as the military dimension of the face off, uh, uh, while that may de escalate temporarily, I feel, and hopefully for a longer term. But the geopolitical dimension of this competition may actually rise or may actually escalate. So we need to see and do a crystal grazing of China from the strategic security perspective and the geopolitical perspective of it. Now, China's strategic regional aspirations, that is the South Asia and the Indian Ocean region, and the global ambitions will continue to focus and limit India's influence and power. Militarily, they will keep the LAC unresolved because it provides them the leverage, and economically, they will impede the development and strategic autonomy of India by keeping adverse economic trade balance and leverages. We need to understand. And the present, I've spoken of the present economic and balance, military balance, which is in China's favor, and therefore we require time to build up upon these things. Now, that brings me to the issue for the top decision makers and the strategic community who look at this relationship to need to understand the dimensions of three Ds: defense, development, and diplomacy. These are the pillars of the nation. If you don't have a strong defense, the development will not take place. If you don't have a strong defense, your diplomacy will not be empowered nor will it be heard globally. So India needs to think of a long-term perspective of China and look at its defense capabilities and dimensions more seriously. What does this translate to? Firstly, as a nation, we need to articulate and have a national security strategy. It can periodically be reviewed, but a national strategic security to give a strategic direction to the nation's security and core interests is important. Two, we need to reconstruct, not reorient or refine. We need to reconstruct the China policy. How are we going to deal with China for what it is? If if things become better, very good. But pragmatism of the new China policy must address holistically our whole of nation response to China, whether it be at the UN, whether it be Quad, whether it be partnership, whether it be economic aspect, or whether it be military aspect. The next aspect is important when I talk of defense. We have a gap in terms of military capabilities and technology capability and infrastructure. That we must accept. So we have to militarily bridge this gap both of modernization, military modernization, and infrastructure on the LSC. And for which we have to look at a joint service doctrine, technology induction for smart war fighting, artificial intelligence, cyber, space, missiles, non contact warfare means, drones, are these sort of future war fighting capabilities are important. Why they're important? Because we have to accept our present deterrence failed and we were surprised in last April. So we have to address and make our deterrence more foolproof, and we have to make our intelligence system and surveillance system far superior to be able to see through before the threat manifests. Even economically and geopolitically, we need to balance our partnerships for furtherance of our national interest. That is important and also achieves to an extent possible in the long term strategic autonomy so that we don't create dependency irrespective of the nation in military or non-economic domain. We also have to keep in mind that our obsession with Pakistan and counterinsurgency ops uh, must dilute, and our focus must go on to the northern borders against China, which is the major threat. Therefore, to cut short, there are many questions which will confront us post present de escalation of military threat, and there are many actions that we need to take with urgency, focus, and defined in a time frame. Are we going to look at India's continued progressive role in the Quad? With the Chinese look at the NATO in Asia? Is the Indo-US bonhomie in the Indo-Pacific and other areas going to grow that much? Or how will we balance the strategic Indo-Russian factor? How will we restrict the present Chinese forays in the Indian economic canvas and at global forums like United Security Council, where we have aspirations to be a part of it? How will we balance the Russia on one side, US on one side, because our military hardware are dependent to a large extent on Russia, but our economic, technological aspects are being focused on US. So how will we reshape our relationships with our neighbors, with immediate neighborhood, with the Chinese making the forays that it has? How do we strengthen the traditional, cultural, and historic bonding that we have with them so that the Chinese economic power does not make a difference in the bonding of India with its neighbor? Well, I would end by saying that we need to look at the strategic security canvas holistically and the geopolitical dynamics beyond Ladakh and Ellis. It's a chess game, and we need to strategize our moves much more in future. How are we going to make 10 moves ahead, well in advance? China can never be trusted. That's a lesson that we have learned repeatedly. And it is better to be prepared for the worst, hoping for the best. Thank you.
So thank you very much, sir, for giving us time, and we will conclude with our one saying that it was a very good time to have some this kind of conversation with you, and we hope that this path continues and in the upcoming sessions, and will be joined by you on continuous basis. Thank you very much, sir. Jai Hind.
Thank you very much, Jayant, and all the very best to the Indian Valor channel as such.
Thank
Jai
you,
Hind.
sir.